Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from As Everything Unfolds, Did You Ask to Be Set Free, out April 10th on Century Media Records. The album has 12 tracks, 41 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are a UK metalcore band. When it comes to the design of this record, at first glance the album appeared to me to be incredibly simple, very straightforward, almost like you could just throw these songs together. The album format wouldn't change, the experience wouldn't change, the record is the record, and the songs do all the heavy lifting. While that is true to a certain degree, the more that I listen to this record, the more I realize that the order in which the songs are presented, the overall structure of this album, definitely has a positive impact in what the overall experience of the record is. It makes for a fun ride, and that's exactly what you want out of a record like this. You don't want necessarily an album that becomes too immersive. You don't want to become, you don't want the album to become too cumbersome for the listener. This album has such a broad sound. It has such a big sound experience that making the overall design feel simple adds to how good that overall experience is. And that to me is where this album really finds its home from a design standpoint. Not becoming rigid, but also not becoming chaotic. Finding the fine line between both allows the record to have a great sense of fluidity from first to last, and that is exactly where the entertainment and enjoyment comes from if you decide to listen to the record from beginning all the way to the end. If you decide to tackle the songs individually, you don't lose absolutely nothing. The only thing that you're losing is what the overall experience of the record could offer if that is the different approach that you decide to take. As far as the sound is concerned, this is definitely a modern metalcore sounding album, but it has alternative, electronic, pop rock influences. There's just a lot coming into this album. It's not an album that's necessarily defined by a single genre or even a single idea. Perhaps the most defining element of this album, or maybe not defining, but definitely consistent, the most consistent element of this album is the electronic side of the sound that the record puts forward. That electronic side of the sound works in multiple facets as far as the impacts that it has on the songs. It creates a more modern experience, that is for sure. This album sounds incredibly more modern, has a great production behind it that also emphasizes that more modern aspect to the sound. In the synths, in the electronic pieces that the record uses, definitely add to that touch of being a more modern approached and executed record. The other aspect of those synths and those electronic elements is that they create a much larger soundscape. They make the record sound much bigger because they fill in all the gaps. You're not just dependent on guitars, drums, bass, vocals. You're adding another layer there that creates a great atmosphere, and in this case of this record, it makes the album sound like an arena style record. It just has a big presence with a lot of substance. At times it also infuses a little bit more of a modern pop rock feel, making the songs a little bit more of a earworm, making the songs more digestible, taking a little bit of the sting away from the more metal side of the band's sound, and definitely creating an easier to digest style music, style sound, style experience that creates ebbs and flows internally within the record because of how different those songs feel and sound from definitely the ones that have a little bit more of a heavier side to them, either heavier side musically, heavier side vocally, or even in some cases both. So the electronic elements are consistent throughout the entire album, but they're not necessarily consistent in terms of the impact that they have on each and every single song. A nice way of creating a very dynamic soundscape and not necessarily allowing one element to dictate the pure simple direction that the record could take. And those electronic elements are also present at times in the vocal performance. They add almost a little bit more of an industrial style approach to the vocals. Overall, it helps make the vocals a little bit richer. At times I feel like it takes a little bit away from Charlie's vocal quality that she possesses and what she can deliver, but in the context of the songs, it adds to the overall allure that the track offers. It definitely adds to the overall vibe and atmosphere that the sound creates. So I'm not totally against it, and I feel like they walked a very fine line and they were very mature about where they wanted to use it and where they peeled back and they pushed back a little bit because perhaps they felt like they were going a step too far. So it's an album that uses that one single element throughout consistently, but with different effects, with different end results, which makes it feel slightly different from track to track. No, it's still an album where you're going to get plenty of guitars, plenty of drums, plenty of bass. It's still a metal album. It's not a pop or R&B, even though it has some of those elements present there. It's still a metal record, a more modern metal sounding record. And the guitars on this album are not the driving force on almost any of the songs. Perhaps they have more of a defining role on the heavier tracks on the album because you feel more of their sound, more of their presence. But in the more melancholic and in the more pop rock style tracks, the guitars are definitely pushed to a more submissive role, and they don't necessarily drive the experience. So it's not a guitar driven or a guitar focused album, even though the guitars still do quite a bit of heavy lifting. And when it comes to creating a heavier experience, the album definitely depends a lot on that guitar sound in order to have that emphasized, either be through breakdowns or some heavier riffs. But the guitars definitely emphasize a lot of the heaviness that this album still holds, that still showcases sporadically throughout the entire experience of listening to the record. Now, the drums are a little bit more consistent. Not as consistent as far as the impact that the electronic side of the sound has on this record, but definitely more than what the guitars offer. They're a little bit in between those two elements. I like the drum sound on this record. I thought the drums on this album offer substance, they offer size, they definitely help give the tracks a little bit more of a robust nature, and that's really important because if you're going to have an album where the electronic elements are making the tracks feel bigger, more complete, more full, like I said, arena style essence and presence, you definitely want something to make that sound feel like there is some thickness to it and it's not just ambiance. So the drums definitely play a role in that, in creating a little bit more thickness to the overall sound. Once again, you notice them a little bit more as far as that thickness and volume is concerned on the heavier tracks than you do on the more melodic, melancholic pop rock tracks. But even on those, you still feel a little bit of the heartbeat coming out of that drum sound, a very warm drum sound throughout the entire album. Now, once you get into the vocals, I mentioned some of the electronic elements on Charlie's vocals. I'm not a huge fan of those in general, but I really like how they were used on this record. I feel like this is a record where everything has a reason and everything has a place. So even an element that it's not necessarily something that I like to see on albums in general worked really well on this record, because not just of that specific execution, but the thought process putting behind it and understanding exactly what you want out of the track and what's the track trying to offer to the listener. Outside of that, it's definitely an album that has more clean vocals than harsh vocals. There are some harsh vocals sprinkled throughout the album. You're going to see them more so on the heavier tracks. Obviously, Danny from Bury Tomorrow does a cameo on one of the songs, and he brings in his harsh vocals to the table. But overall, this is definitely an album that relies on Charlie's clean vocals, and her clean vocals are amazing throughout this entire record. The overall vocal performance on this album is really strong, and I would say if there's one element that becomes the focal point, the center of the attention of the entire album, is the vocal performance. With its dynamics, with its ebbs and flows, with its changes in different directions, yes, but it's definitely a focal point due to the quality, due to the emotion that they offer. This is one of their most emotionally driven records, and you see that incredibly well defined in the vocal performance that you're going to get throughout the entire album. And it was definitely a focus for me to really gravitate towards it, and it adds to the experience when you have songs that understand how hooky the choruses can be, how hooky the pre-choruses can be. A lot of the songs on this record have more of a pop rock song structure and definitely pop rock style choruses. So the vocals in those choruses, they hit completely different. They take you to a whole different level from an emotional standpoint, and you almost forget how hooky, how catchy they are, because you're taken back by the overall essence of the performance and of the lyrical content and the emotion that comes out through that performance and out of that lyrical content. So great vocal performance all around. Definitely one of the highlights of this album, which in my opinion is the band's best record to date, their most complete album, definitely their most well-rounded record. I honestly feel like the band has been looking for their sound, or they've been looking for their identity. It's not easy to find who you are, discover who you are, and then be comfortable within it. But the band has definitely taken the right steps to get closer to that stage. I'm not sure if this is their sound. This is definitely their sound now. I don't know if it's going to be their sound tomorrow. But it's a record where you see the execution, the thought process, the planning, offering this more complete body of work as far as a full record is concerned, but even as far as the individual songs go. Not afraid of taking chances, not afraid of going outside the box, better yet, not afraid of redesigning what the box should be. This album definitely is going to set the bar for them as far as what they're going to do going forward. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Cut the Lies. Super fun, big sounding track. The electronic elements really help. The size and the feel has that arena essence to it. The drums and guitars definitely infuse a little bit more of a modern metalcore sound and experience to this track. The vocals are super warm. I love how the electronic elements allow the track at times to breathe a little bit better. The vocals stand out throughout the entire song. They feel so warm, so powerful. It's a very strong, vocally driven and vocally delivered song. The chorus is phenomenal. I'm not going to say that this is the best chorus on the album, because I honestly feel like every song on this record has the best chorus in the album. So it's a great song, both musically and vocally. Very complete track. Definitely one of those that becomes an earworm, without a shadow of a doubt. Then you have Idols. Definitely one of the heavier tracks on the album. Definitely one of the more metal songs on the album, both from a musical sense, but also from a vocal perspective. The pre-chorus is super special, and I think the chorus is only as good as it is, as memorable as it is, as hooky as it is, because of the way the pre-chorus really helps set it up. But the vocal melodies, both in the pre-chorus and chorus, are outstanding. It becomes such a huge part of this song, the combination of those two, and one really feeds the other. The verses are definitely more driven, faster, heavier, with the electronic elements sometimes touching up on the vocals. The vocals come in from a different direction, from a different angle, feeling a lot heavier because of those electronic elements. Definitely making the song more textural all around, even though the verses feel very narrow in terms of the direction that they take. They have a lot within that small amount of space. They definitely have a lot of texture within that small amount of space, which makes the song super interesting. Then once you get into the pre-chorus, it starts to blossom, and then everything leads up to that amazing chorus where everything comes to life. It's just a great track, one of the heaviest tracks on the album for sure, both musically and vocally, and I think it really showcases that you can make some heavier tracks and not lose anything as far as the earworm and how catchy and how hooky a song can be. Last but definitely not least, Setting Sun. This is the closing track on the record. I think if there's one song that couldn't be moved around in the track listing, this is it. This had to be the closing song. It's incredibly melancholic. It feels like a dark ballad. It definitely has this sense of being stripped down, being more emotionally driven. Once again, allowing the vocals to drive the song, to drive the emotion within the song, allowing the vocals to be the focal point of the track, and everything there that is there around it to embrace it and to elevate it. It's a great track. It's a beautiful track. There's a sense of sadness. Like I said, there's a sense of darkness. There's a sense of sorrow. So emotionally driven, so emotionally drenched. You can get emotion out of the sound, out of the vocals, out of the lyrics. It's just a great song to finish off a record that is such a fun, amazing ride, even though it does hold a lot of darkness all the way throughout. The way that darkness is presented into the light. There's a sense of opening up and allowing that darkness to come out when you listen to this entire record. This song is a little bit of the closing of those windows and keeping, once again, that darkness a little bit on the inside and not letting it out again. So it's a great closer for the overall experience of the record, but on its own, it's just a great song all around. This is it. As everything unfolds, with their latest record, Did You Ask to Be Set Free, out April 10th on Century Media Records. Hit me up in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts. I'll see you all at the next one. Take care, guys.